Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very big breaking news story here, a rumor about PlayStation 6 and the next generation. So very cut and dry. We have a report here from Tom Henderson, writing for Insider Gaming about PlayStation 6, and that it will have a detachable disk drive. Now, as a very brief reminder here, Tom's reporting has been incredibly accurate when it comes to the PlayStation hardware roadmap, as we saw from various accessories relating to the Pulse Elite, Pulse Explorer, PlayStation Portal, and inevitably also the detachable drive that we have right now for PlayStation 5 Slim and PS5 Pro. So it's definitely noteworthy that we have Tom here, where it's based on several sources who will remain anonymous. And it will be an identical setup that we have right now with PS5 Slim consoles. So customers can, as we're hearing, buy a digital PS6 or a PS6 with the disk drive already attached, or upgrade later by buying the drive separately. According to one source, PlayStation is, quote, firm on the decision because the existing drive for PS5 has hit all of the company's internal targets. And this decision was made to reduce manufacturing and shipping costs during the tariff and trade war. Obviously, PlayStation is going to be very mindful of that, and we're really not that far away from PlayStation 6. We are still in this current administration, so in all likelihood, this tracks with what we were hearing too from Tom over on Moore's Law is Dead as far as the SoC and the bill of materials, things like that. But there's also been some rumblings that suggest PS6 will have a much simpler design to maximize efficiency, shipping space, and weight. Another big problem we saw initially with PlayStation 5 itself, the base fatty console, is that the thing was gargantuan and quite large, and that also extended to the retail box as well, and thus then we had the slim console, as Sony does like to do every 3-4 years or so. Now, Tom also does go on to mention that the new CFI 2100 series consoles that's coming up very soon, the one we talked about on LTPS, where that's going to be a new digital console, it's the same basic design of PS5 Slim. However, for the digital edition, in particular in the EU, it is dropping down from 1 terabyte internal SSD storage to 825, probably to be mindful of costs, margins, and Sony has always been losing money on digital consoles for quite a while, so they want to be mindful of that. But he does mention that console will indeed see a reduction in weight to save a few pennies, which is also what we were theorizing on Friday, is that typically with these very soft model revisions, externally they might look exactly the same, and sometimes they might make a very minor change on the outside, but principally it's the same design, just that internally they might move stuff around, cost down, and in some cases too try to make it weigh just a tad lower, because that will be pennies that add up to millions when they start shipping these things globally. But that's what we have there. Now, obviously, for the most part, great news. And I say great news because that has been a growing fear in the community. And I would say myself, but I really wasn't too surprised to hear this news. I was pretty confident in saying PlayStation 6 will offer disc support. My curiosity was, what does that look like? Now, I think the safe bet is that it was going to pretty much have the detachable drive thing again. It seems like that model has worked quite well for PlayStation 5 in the here and now, so that's probably what Sony was going to do going into the next generation of consoles. It was just a matter of, will it be only a digital console, just one SKU at retail, and then you have to buy a drive separately, or will it be that alongside another standard option of it's a little bit more expensive, maybe there is a cost savings on buying it bundled in, but you do have the option to buy a SKU right then and there that has the drive already attached. And, you know, option one might seem harmless on its own, but I think it's really important to have two SKUs where one does have the drive immediately, because then there's just a sort of baseline minimum on consoles that we know reliably the install base does have disk support, or rather there's a lot of consoles out there that have disk support. Because, you know, we're going to have the hardware news coming out from Circana tracking video game hardware sales data, same from the GfK, you know, UK sales data coming in. We'll be able to get a bird's eye view of what the sales ratio is on how many digital and disc consoles Sony is selling. So it's really important to, at least day one, I find, have a SKU that does have that drive bundled in, so we can get a good idea of just how many consoles are out there that at a minimum we know they can play discs. If it's only digital, we really will have no idea, and that doesn't really bode well for having that option, that disc playback, even though in theory I suspect this will be the final generation where discs are being offered. Like, the other curiosity I had was, will we get PlayStation 6 printed games? I find that, okay, we were going to have a drive. Is it going to be something where it's attached in with its own bundle? Will it be this sort of weird external looking thing, kind of like the HD DVD drive for 360, where it feels like an afterthought? I was hoping it would be something very similar to what we have right now. So for the most part, I think this is all great news. The only downside is this means there will be no truly offline PlayStation 6 console that will be able to, out of the box, play discs, because that means it's going to be a very similar setup to what we have right now, which is at the very minimum one single online handshake to pair a drive to PlayStation 5. It does not matter, even to consoles that come with the drive attached, you still need to pair the drive. Sony does not pair them from the factory. I would love them to do that. I would love that to be the case with PlayStation 6, but unfortunately, that's the way it is, and as a reminder, the reason why that is because the drive on its own cannot mount disc games. It needs to decrypt them with a key, and every console has a unique console ID, and that ID is part of the hash to decrypt the games. This is basically an anti-piracy thing, where if PS5 on its own was decrypting the keys, then the algorithm could get easily discovered, and via jailbreak, people would be able to start pirating games, essentially, right? Like, I understand why Sony does it, and I would love for them to possibly sunset PlayStation 5 consoles well into the future for those drives, at least, so that it doesn't need to do that anymore, but I think that's very unlikely given the circumstance of PlayStation 6 will likely be using something very similar. And that's partly why. I still find it's very important that we have an offline console. We don't want to be in a position where there's tens of millions of PS5s that are basically useless in their e-waste in 15, 20 years. There's still so much utility to all the PS3s and 4s out there that can play discs with being completely offline. I think that's great. So that's my concern, although I will be a little bit soft on this issue, if only because if PS6 will be the same thing, where Sony will have to have this server available, in theory that's the same server that can pair these drives, and therefore that'll be up for another 20 something years because now it's renewed on PlayStation 6. I mean, the litmus test is PlayStation 3 and Vita. Like, these consoles, the handhelds are still, they can still log into PSN. We still have trophy syncing, and that's nearly 19, 20 something years onward. So don't get me wrong, there is a very long-term reliable path that Sony still offers here, but there is still a future where it's a lot of e-waste if there is no server that these consoles can connect to. I think that sucks. The other part of it too is, like, PS5 has the SSD soldered onto the board, so in theory that's the thing that has a shorter shelf life than Sony's own server, which is maybe a little bit embarrassing, but that's just the way I see it. But either way, I think this is great news. It's awesome that we have a very, not confirmed report, but a reliable report that does suggest we will be able to carry over PS4 5 discs and probably have PlayStation 6 printed discs as well, and that will be fantastic news. Remains to be seen if PS6 games will start to balloon in size to the point where, oh no, more and more publishers are not printing full Gold Masters on an Ultra HD Blu-ray, or not buying a second Ultra HD Blu-ray to ship an entire full offline Gold Master. But it's not truly offline. Just to also clarify too, drives can be paired one time without a PSN ID. After that, the console can be completely offline. That's still misinformation with the drives and PlayStation 5. It is one online handshake, and you can't just pair drives across a ton of PS5s. The second you move one drive over and then move it back, you have to re-register it. But you can register one time without a PSN ID, a very stock console, and then from that point on, it can remain offline. I would think PS6 is not going to be all that different, but yeah, this all sounds about accurate, especially reducing the console size and weight. And I would think the design of this machine, I mean, it could look like anything. Sony does like to make their consoles very distinct and different looking. PS5, a very good example, obviously. But I would presume the size is not going to be nearly as gargantuan as what we have right now, especially with the report that this thing is not going to be incredibly impressive with on-paper specs, and there's some concern there as far as how PS6 will sound enticing to consumers in the here and now, but there's still a lot of upside with ray tracing and ML, and I think that is how PlayStation 6 will be able to hopefully define itself from a visual standpoint, but also from a console form factor, size, and very importantly, the price tag as well. But anyway, I just wanted to cover that breaking news real quick. Obviously, that's a story that I was patiently waiting for, and it's encouraging to know that PS6 probably will still support discs. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me in this breaking news, and I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.